How did I end up here? I was sitting on a cold, damp sidewalk in Canton, Ohio, wrapped in a thin blanket that smelled like wet pavement. Just 2 years ago, I was a man people looked up to. I had a high-paying job in tech, a beautiful home, and a family that claimed to love me. Now, I was staring at a half-eaten burger I had found in the trash and behind a local diner. My hands were cracked from the winter wind, and my stomach hurt so much it felt like it was folding on itself. I saw a group of teenagers walk by, and they laughed, pointing at me as if I were a ghost or a piece of garbage. The humiliation was a heavy weight in my chest. I used to be the one who paid for my brother's college tuition. I was the one who bought my sister her first car. I was the one who kept my parents' mortgage paid when they fell behind. Now, I was invisible to them. People I had helped for years now crossed the street just to avoid making eye contact with me. I closed my eyes and whispered to the cold air, "Why me?" The downfall happened so fast it felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My company went under during a massive market crash, and because I had put all my personal savings into trying to save my employees' jobs, I was left with nothing. I thought my family would be my safety net. I went to my brother, Simon, first. He lived in a house I had helped him buy. When I knocked on his door, shivering and hungry, he didn't even let me inside the hallway. He looked at me through the crack of the door with a look of pure disgust. "Look, Silas, we just don't have the space right now," he said, his voice cold and flat. "You're a grown man. You should have been more responsible with your money. Don't bring your failure to my doorstep." He shut the door in my face, and I heard the deadbolt click. That sound broke something inside me. It was the sound of a brother becoming a stranger. I walked away into the rain, wondering how the man I had protected since he was a child could leave me to freeze on the street without a second thought. Before we get into the rest of this journey, I want to ask, where are you watching from? Please drop your city or country in the comments. Seeing where everyone has helped me feel less alone, and your support means a world to me. Some names and minor details have been changed for privacy, but the emotions and the lessons are very real. Now, back to the darkest time of my life. After Simon turned me away, I tried calling my sister, Clara. She didn't even answer my calls. She sent me a text that read, "Please don't call me asking for money. We are busy with the kids' soccer camp. Good luck with everything." My parents were no better. They told me I was an embarrassment to the family name. I spent 6 months living in a homeless shelter, and when that got too crowded, I slept under the bridge on 12th Street. I learned which dumpsters had the freshest food and which shops would let me stand near the heater for 5 minutes before kicking me out. I became a master being small and quiet. I was a failure, a loser, and a bum in their eyes. One afternoon, while I was sitting near the public library to stay warm, I saw my parents walking toward a high-end restaurant across the street. They looked happy, dressed in the expensive wool coats I had bought them for Christmas 2 years prior. I stood up, hoping maybe, just maybe, if they saw me in person, their hearts would melt. I walked toward them, my old boots squelching in the slush. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, my voice raspy from a cough I couldn't shake. They stopped and looked at me. My mother's face twisted in horror, not for me, but because of how I looked. "Silas, get away from us," my father hissed, stepping in front of my mother as if I were a dangerous animal. "We are meeting friends for lunch. Do not come near us looking like that. You are a disgrace." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, crumpled up, and threw it at my feet. "Take this and go away. Don't let our friends see you." They turned their backs on me and walked into the restaurant. I stood there, looking at the $5 in the snow, and realized my family was dead to me. That moment in the snow was my turning point. I didn't pick up the $5. I let the wind blow it away into the gutter. I realized that as long as I saw myself as a victim, I would stay on the street. I walked into the library and spent every single day there. I wasn't just staying warm. I was studying. I used the free computers to look up every bit of information I could find on distressed real estate and digital marketing. I found a tiny glimmer of hope when I discovered a bounty program for a tech firm that needed a complex bug fixed in their system. It was a job no one could solve, but I had designed similar systems back in my glory days. I worked on that code for 18 hours a day on the library computer, saving my work on a cheap flash drive I found in a lost and found bin. My stomach was screaming for food, but my brain was on fire with a plan. I submitted the fix at 4:59 p.m. on a Friday. On Monday morning, I checked my email. There was a message from the CEO. The email said the fix worked perfectly. They didn't just pay me the $5,000 bounty. They offered me a remote consulting contract worth $20,000 a month. I sat in that library chair and cried silently so the librarian wouldn't kick me out. I didn't run to tell my family. I didn't go buy a fancy steak. I went to a cheap laundromat, washed my only set of clothes, and bought a gym membership just so I could use a shower every morning. I found a tiny one-room apartment in a rough part of town and lived on beans and rice, saving every single penny. I worked like a man possessed. Within 6 months, I had turned that $20,000 into $100,000 by investing in the very market sectors that had crashed before. I was an underdog who knew exactly how the system worked. I lived like I was still homeless while my bank account grew into a monster. I had a goal that kept me awake at night. I wanted to buy the one thing my family valued more than me, their status. My family lived in a luxury apartment complex called the Heights. It was a beautiful brick building with a gold leaf lobby and a doorman. I knew the owner of the building, a man named Mr. Sterling, was looking to retire and move to Florida. I had done some high-level data work for his firm, and we had struck up a professional friendship. I met him for coffee, wearing a sharp suit I had tailored to fit my leaner frame. I didn't look like the bum from the street anymore. I looked like a shark. "Mr. Sterling, I heard you're looking to offload the Heights," I said, putting my briefcase on the table. He nodded, looking tired. "It's a headache, Silas. The maintenance is high, and the tenants are getting demanding." I smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "I'll take it off your hands. Cash, no contingencies." He looked shocked, but money talks. 3 weeks later, the deed was signed. I was now the sole owner of the building where my brother, my sister, and my parents lived. They didn't know their landlord was a man they had left to rot under a bridge. The first thing I did as a new owner was review the tenant files. I found exactly what I expected. My brother Simon was 3 months behind on his rent, using his status to bully the previous management into giving him extensions. My sister Clara had been complaining about a leaky faucet for a year just to get a discount on her lease. My parents were living in a penthouse unit they couldn't actually afford, barely scraping by on their Social Security while trying to look rich. They were all frauds. They had abandoned me because they were terrified of being seen with a failure. Yet they were failing in secret every single day. I sat in the manager's office, looking at the security cameras. I saw Simon walking to the lobby, acting like he owned the place, waving at the doorman who he probably didn't tip. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. The trap was set. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about accountability. It was about making sure they finally felt the cold that I had lived in for so long. I sent out a formal notice to all tenants that the building had changed ownership and that a mandatory financial review was required for all lease renewals. I didn't put my name on the letter. I used my holding company, Phoenix Rising. I scheduled the meetings for the following Monday. I wanted them to come to me. Simon was the first one to walk into the office. He was wearing a designer shirt that I remembered paying for 3 years ago. He walked in with his chest puffed out, ready to charm the new guy into giving him another rent extension. "Look, I know I'm a little behind," Simon started, looking at the back of my executive chair, "but I'm a high-value tenant here. My family has been here for years." I slowly turned the chair around. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles turning white. "Silas," he whispered, his voice trembling. I leaned back and crossed my arms. "It's Mr. Vance to you, Simon, and I believe you owe me $15,000 in back rent." Simon started to stammer, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. "Silas, I didn't know. How did you?" I cut him off with a sharp wave of my hand. How did I get from the trash can to this chair? Hard work and the realization that I didn't have a brother to help me. "You told me I should be more responsible with my money, Simon. Well, I bought this building. Now, let's talk about your responsibility. You have 24 hours to pay the balance in full, or the sheriff will be at your door to move your things to the sidewalk. I hear the 12th Street Bridge has some space. Simon started to cry. A grown man, sobbing in my office. Please, Silas, we have nowhere to go. My wife will leave me. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a calm sense of justice. You didn't care where I went when it was raining, Simon. Why should I care where you go now? I stood up and pointed to the door. 24 hours. Tick-tock. Clara was next. She came in 20 minutes later, unaware that Simon had just left through the back exit, in a state of collapse. She walked in swinging her expensive handbag, looking annoyed. I hope the new owner is going to fix the elevator issues, she snapped before even looking at me. When she finally realized who was sitting behind the desk, she dropped her bag. Silas, what is this? Is this some kind of joke? I looked at her with a bored expression. The only joke, Clara, is your lease agreement. You've been getting a hardship discount for 2 years while posting photos of your luxury vacations on social media. That's called fraud. She turned bright red. I have kids, Silas. You can't do this to your own sister. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. I was your brother when you sent that text telling me not to call you. I was your brother when I was eating from a dumpster. Today, I am your landlord. And as your landlord, I am terminating your lease for violation of terms. You have 1 week to vacate. She started screaming, calling me a monster and a heartless snake. I just sat there and recorded the entire thing on the office security system. Are you done? I asked when she ran out of breath. Because every second you spend screaming is a second you aren't packing. I'd suggest you call Simon. He's looking for a new place, too. Maybe you can share a tent. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. I took a deep breath and looked at the final file on my desk. My parents. This was the one that hurt the most. These were the people who gave me life, and then tried to throw it away when it became embarrassing. I knew they were waiting in the lobby. I told my assistant to send them in. They walked in slowly, looking frail and nervous. When they saw me, my mother gasped and clutched her chest. My father just stood there, his jaw dropping. Silas, my mother whispered. Our beautiful son? You're the owner? My father tried to pull the dad card immediately. He walked toward me with his hand extended, a fake smile plastered on his face. Silas, we knew you'd bounce back. We always had faith in you, son. We were just giving you some tough love to help you find your spark again. I didn't take his hand. I stayed seated. Tough love. I asked, my voice echoing in the quiet office. Is that what you call throwing a crumpled $5 bill at your son in the snow? Is that what you call telling your friends I was a disgrace? My mother started to weep. We were scared. Silas, we didn't know what to do. I looked her in the eye. You knew how to eat the dinner I paid for. You knew how to wear the coats I bought. But when the man who provided those things needed a sandwich, you turned your backs. I pulled out their eviction notice. The Heights is a luxury building. Since you can no longer afford the rent without my subsidies, I'm moving you to a smaller unit, in a different building, in a much worse neighborhood. My father's face turned from fake joy to pure rage. You can't do that. We are your parents. You owe us. I stood up then, and for the first time, I let my shadow fall over them. I was taller, stronger, and more powerful than I had ever been. I owe you nothing, I said firmly. I paid my debt to you 10 times over before I lost my job. I saved your home. I paid your medical bills. And in return, you let me sleep in the dirt. You didn't just fail as parents. You failed as human beings. I pushed the paperwork across the desk. Sign the voluntary move-out agreement, and I won't sue you for the back rent you owe. Refuse, and I'll take everything you have left, including those coats you're wearing. They looked at the paper, then at me. They realized the bum was gone. In his place was a man they had created through their own cruelty. My mother signed the paper with shaking hands, her tears spotting the ink. The story started to leak out into the local community. The homeless billionaire who bought his family's building became the talk of Canton. People who had ignored me on the street were now calling my office, trying to reconnect. I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in fake friends or a fake family. I spent my weekends volunteering at the same homeless shelter that had taken me in when I had nothing. I didn't just give them money. I gave them my time. I helped them write resumes and taught them the same tech skills that had saved me. I wanted to build a community of people who actually cared about each other, not people who only cared about status. Meanwhile, the moving trucks arrived at the Heights. I watched from my office window as Simon loaded his furniture into a cheap U-Haul. I saw Clara crying as she loaded her kids into a car that was about to be repossessed. There was no joy in seeing their pain, but there was a profound sense of balance. The world was right again. A few days later, I received a group text from Simon. It was a picture of a small, cramped apartment they were all sharing. "Silas, please." The message read, "It's freezing here. The heat doesn't work. Mom is sick. Have a heart." I looked at the message and remembered the night I had a fever under the bridge, shivering so hard my teeth chipped. I remembered calling Simon and hearing him tell me to be responsible. I typed back a simple reply. "There's a local library nearby. They have free computers. I suggest you start studying. Hard work is the best way to find your spark." I blocked all their numbers. I knew they weren't sorry for what they did. They were only sorry that they were the ones who were cold now. I had given them a place to live. It just wasn't a luxury one. I was being more responsible with my money than they ever were. The catharsis was complete. I had gone from the trash can to the boardroom, and I had done it without the help of the people who should have loved me most. I realized that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands next to you when the lights go out. My doorman, a man named Marcus who had once given me a sandwich when I was homeless, and he didn't know who I was now my head of security with a tripled salary. The librarian who had let me stay past closing time to finish my code was now the director of a literacy program I funded. These were my real family. I sat in my penthouse, the one I had earned with my own sweat and tears, and looked out over the city. The lights of Canton twinkled below me, and for the first time in years, I wasn't shivering. I was warm. I was safe. And I was home. A year passed, and my business grew even further. I became a leader in the Ohio tech scene, but I never forgot the smell of the wet pavement. I kept a small jar of dirt from under that 12th Street bridge on my desk. It reminded me of where I came from and what I had survived. Every time a business deal got tough, I looked at that dirt and reminded myself that nothing could be harder than that first night in the rain. My family tried to sue me, claiming elder abuse and unlawful eviction. But since I had every single interaction recorded and every financial document in order, the case was laughed out of court. The judge even scolded them for their vile behavior toward their son. They were officially cast out of the social circles they had worked so hard to stay in. They were now the disgraces they had accused me of being. I decided to sell the Heights. It had served its purpose. I sold it to a nonprofit that turned it into affordable housing for veterans and struggling families. I made sure the transition was smooth and that the new owners had the funding they needed to keep it running perfectly. I moved to a quiet house in the country, away from the noise and the ghosts of my past. I started a foundation that focused on digital equity, providing high-speed internet and computers to every shelter in the state. I want to make sure the next Silas didn't have to wait for a library to open to save his life. I felt a deep sense of purpose. My story wasn't just a revenge fantasy anymore. It was a blueprint for a better world. One morning, I was at a local coffee shop when I saw a familiar face. It was my mother. She was working behind the counter, wearing a stained apron. She looked older, her hair gray and unkempt. She didn't see me at first. I watched her struggle to keep up with the orders, her hands shaking as she poured the coffee. When I stepped up to the counter, she looked up and froze. "Silas," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. She didn't ask for money this time. She just looked at me with a profound sadness. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice so quiet I could barely hear it. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her and realized the anger was completely gone. I saw a woman who had lost everything because she valued the wrong things. I reached out and put my hand over hers. "I know, Mom," I said. "I hope you find your way." I left a $100 tip and walked out. I didn't go back. The satisfaction of the big reveal was long gone, replaced by a steady, quiet happiness. I had learned that the best way to win was to live a life so good that the opinions of the people who hurt you no longer mattered. My brother Simon eventually moved away to find work in a different state. Clara stayed in town, working 2 jobs to keep her kids in school. They were learning the lessons I had learned the hard way. Maybe one day they would grow into better people. Maybe not. It wasn't my responsibility to fix them. I had already saved myself, and that was enough. I spent my evenings in my garden, watching the sunset and listening to the wind in the trees. I was at peace. People still ask me how I stayed so calm during those meetings in the office. They ask how I didn't scream or throw them out on the spot. I tell them that when you've lost everything, you gain a perspective that people who have always been comfortable can't understand. Rage is a luxury for the people who have something to lose. When you're on the street, rage just burns up the energy you need to find food. I had replaced my anger with a cold, hard logic. I wasn't being mean to my family. I was simply allowing them to experience the consequences of their own choices. That is the ultimate form of respect. Treating someone like an adult who is responsible for their own actions. My tech firm eventually went public, and I became a very wealthy man once again. But I didn't buy a fleet of cars or a giant yacht. I lived a simple life. I drove a reliable truck and wore comfortable clothes. I realized that the status my family had chased was a trap. It made you vulnerable to the opinions of strangers. I didn't care what strangers thought of me anymore. I only cared about what the man in the mirror thought. And that man was proud. He had survived the cold, the hunger, and the betrayal. He had built a mountain out of the stones people had thrown at him. He was a survivor. To anyone watching this who is going through their own dark winter, don't give up. The world will try to tell you that you are your bank account or your job title. You are not. You are your resilience. You are the fire that keeps burning when the wind tries to put it out. Use the humiliation as fuel. Use the betrayal as a map to show you who doesn't belong in your future. Stay calm, work hard, and wait for your moment. The bridge you are sleeping under today could be the view from your office tomorrow. I am Silas Vance, and I am proof that the underdog can win the whole game. As I close this chapter of my life, I want to say thank you for being part of this journey with me. Your comments and your stories of your own struggles have been a light for me. Remember, your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth, even if that someone is your own family. I'm going to go sit on my porch now and watch the stars. They are the same stars I saw from the sidewalk in Canton, but they look much brighter from here. My family ignored me when I was homeless, and they called me crying after I bought their building. But the best part of the story isn't that I bought the building. It's that I finally found myself. Good night, everyone. Be kind to each other.